All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. I'm very happy to touch base with somebody I haven't talked to for a while, buddy of mine. And without further ado, I want to introduce and welcome Mr. Richard Duguay. How you doing, Richard?
Doing good, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, man, no problem. I've been wanting to touch base and catch up for a long time, so this is great. Um, for those who are unfamiliar with Richard, he's originally from Canada. He's been a musician since the 70s, has played with some great bands, has done some fantastic solo work, and has also worked with some familiar faces that quite a few people are aware of. So we're going to get into a lot of history in this conversation and take things as they come. But I figured, Richard, let's start off in the here and now, which is always the most important thing when it comes to music and people's activities. From what I understand, you are in the process of doing a new solo record. Is that correct?
Yeah. Um, we're in the middle of pre-production right now. Recording next weekend. Like it's going to be 5-song EP, and it'll be finished, mixed, and mastered on the 17th. So we're raring to go. And got a great band. I got Brian Irving on drums, who played on Beautiful Decline. We got Joe Bondoc on bass, who's also in Mono Deluxe and Circus of Power, and Mike Gavigan, who's in the Slambonistas, uh, the Blessings, and he was Ace Frehley in a tribute band. So what more could you ask for?
Right on. And you're singing and playing guitar on this record too, as you've done in the
Yeah,
past. You're
right. Yep.
excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's the last couple of records have been created in this room here. And this time we're actually going to this great studio next Saturday, Sunday. And kind of wanted something more immediate this time rather than that 2.5, 3 year gap it takes me to create these crazy records. So this is kind of going to be a lot more straight ahead and just, minimum amount of overdubs and just get that live feel and sound going, hopefully.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
That's excellent, man. Well, let's go way, way back, and we'll catch up again to the
Mhm.
present time, but um, your history as a working musician, meaning you're playing gigs and putting out records, that kind of dates back to really the golden year of punk rock, 1977. Um,
It's when it started. Yeah. I don't think I started playing right then, but that's what definitely got me going.
well, around that time, 77, 78, I guess your first proper band was Lowlife, right?
Yeah.
Up in Canada. And
Yep.
I know you guys had actually, you did a 45
Right.
during that time. So, what can you tell me about sort of the first steps you took with that band and how that came together and your entry into this whole crazy world?
Well, in Canada, this will be lost on Americans, but who knows? There was this local TV show called Reach for the Top, which was like all the different high schools around Winnipeg, kind of like a Jeopardy type show. And for some strange reason, I was on the team. Uh, yeah, I know. And anyway, I was asking the questions one day, and I was just making them up, and I I asked the contestants, who is the drummer for the Damned? And of course, nobody got it. But this guy who was studying in the library a bunch of tables over heard, and he was like, he had heard of punk rock and stuff like that. So he sought me out, and we started hanging out and figuring that, just the love of punk rock and the MC5, the Stooges, the Dolls, etc. And then I remember reading in that fanzine Sniffing Glue, Mark Perry.
Right.
There was it was like a photocopied or Xeroxed, however it was back then, a picture of Brian James from the Damned, and the quote under it was like a full page photo with a quote. And it's like, nobody playing in the band is useless or something. And it really resonated with me because I had wanted to play guitar for years at that point, but we were pretty poor and stuff like that. And I bugged my dad, and the guy he was playing baseball with was selling music lessons for some store. So he got the guy to come over to give me an aptitude lesson, or an aptitude test, actually. And I thought he'd bring a guitar. He brought an accordion. And so he's giving me these, dexterity and aptitude things, which I failed miserably. He told my dad, like, no, he's got absolutely no musical aptitude. So that was that for a while. But then when I went Mark Halderson, as I was saying, we just decided, it gave us the Pistols and the Damned and the Clash and the Hot Rods and all those early bands. They basically were telling us, or everybody, that you can do it. You can, you don't have to be a virtuoso, et cetera, et cetera. So we bought shitty equipment, and we just started fucking around and just doing really horrible one-finger guitar part covers of like the Saints and the Ramones, of course, and whatever, early Stooges. And somehow we roped a few other people from school into this band, and it was horrible. We did 2 shows, one at there was a greaser day at our high school, and we got on the gig, and people were throwing eggs at us, and the whole welcome to show business routine. And then a few months later, there was an ad in the newspaper about a punk rock festival at the University of Manitoba. So we got a hold of them, and we got on the bill because we thought we were the only people in Winnipeg who were actually into this music. Winnipeg is a pretty tough, what would be the Midwest of Canada, and sort of, long before technology ruled our world. It was super isolated. So this punk rock festival, we saw these other bands who were into the same sort of things that we were. And it just, right from that first official punk rock festival in Winnipeg, it changed everything. All of a sudden, I had, even though we were terrible, I mean, and there was no doubt about that, but it was amazing. We did it, it wasn't sex, drugs, and rock and roll by any stretch. It was just rock and roll, and just the joy. And we eventually changed members and got a new singer and guitar player, and that's the band that ended up doing recording the Leaders 45. We had broken up by the time this single came out, of course. But by then we had become considerably better, me and Mark, the rhythm section, as it was at that point. And we just kind of kept moving on to different bands, and there's a million bands, of course, during those times. Some we're talking about, some not. But it just kept, when we first started, our goal was to put out a 45. And we did that within a year and change, something like that. And then it was like, well, it'd be great to do an album. So we both ended up in this band called La Kill, which morphed into Personality Crisis. There's some member changes, and and it was getting more serious. So people had to go because they weren't on the same page musically, and it was, that was the part that really, it sucked, but it had to be done. It's like, not that we had any delusions of making it. I mean, that wasn't the point. The point is to be this great band, which eventually it turned into, and it took a few more member changes and stuff. And we somehow got on a Romantics tour in must have been early 81, in the middle of winter. We did Winnipeg, Regina, and Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. And I think it was January, and January up in Winnipeg and the prairies was like the coldest time of the year. There was snow, blowing snow. It was like 30 below, 40 below, So we had bought a 1955 or something Bluebird school bus that probably hadn't been tuned up since 1957 or something, We had there was no heat in this thing. So we left the show in Winnipeg to go to Regina, which is like 300 miles or something. And we were young. We were like 19, 20, something like that. But our road crew, he was 14. And everybody's, and we had one 8-track, which was the New York Dolls' first album. So that just played for 6 hours or however long the trip was. So during the middle of the night traveling, we look over, and the roadie, Ken Cormack, his lips are turning blue. It's so cold in the bus. There's absolutely no heat. We can't stop the bus because it wouldn't start if we stopped it. So we, I don't know what we did or how we did it, but he survived. And that was kind of our first taste of something other than the clubs, like the Winnipeg, the bars, actually. There was some hall shows, and, in the early days, 78 stuff, Low Life would, like they did in every city, rent out an ethnic hall for like $75, and you brought in a rudimentary PA and maybe some lights, or just use the lights on the stage in the hall. So, that's how we came up. And I mean, I could talk for hours on each segment, but I'm trying to like move it on. So playing real shows like with the Romantics, and they had just had maybe 6 months before. That's what I like about You had come out, and was
Right.
pretty huge. So they were drawing decent crowds in Winnipeg and Regina. So that kind of opened our eyes to a different thing, like the ladder of whatever it may be. And then, we did more touring around Winnipeg, and then we went out to Vancouver that summer, I guess. And the bus broke down on the side of the road, and we sold it for $1, and then had to get a U-Haul, and most of us had to sit in the back enclosed cube van thing, which was great when you're going 70 miles an hour and you can't see anything and you have no idea what's coming up. So we ended up out in Vancouver, and we didn't know what the fuck we were doing, and we were pretty green, and we ended up breaking up. And then me and Mitch Funk, the singer, we flew back to Winnipeg, and that was it for me for a year and a half or something. And Mitch went back to Cal, blah blah blah. So we the next fall or something, Walter Cott, the other rhythm player, quit, and they asked me to play guitar. I was playing bass prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, kind of, I guess, the glory days of Personality Crisis was 83 and 84, where we spent months and months down in California and in San Francisco and Berkeley mostly, but just and then the album came out, Creatures for Well, in 84, or it might have been 83. But the record company didn't, it's kind of like, it's almost exactly like it is now, where you have these labels, and it's amazing that there's labels out putting vinyl out, considering how expensive it is and how long it takes to get. And it's a limited market, I would assume, just because not everybody has record players anymore. But they invested in pressing the record and stuff like that, but didn't really promote it, didn't have any money to give us to actually tour properly, whatever that means when you're touring in a van with 7 people, right? So we went up through the Midwest and stuff like that, and then that era was my first time with health issues regarding extracurricular activities, and I was really not doing so well. So I split from Chicago. We were staying with Articles of Faith.
Right.
Yeah, Vic Bondi and Meat, I believe the bass player was, who were amazing guys, and we stayed there for like a week and a half and saw a couple of Cub games, which was amazing because I was always a big baseball fan. Then I split back to Winnipeg, and they continued on for another 3 weeks or 2 weeks or something, and did one more show in Winnipeg. We're talking Personality Crisis.
Right.
And then that was it. And, I slowly got my health back together, and, ish, as much as one could at that point. And then there was a few more bands in Winnipeg, etc. But I wouldn't say I outgrew Winnipeg. I just think I kind of got bored. So me and my first wife, Erin, we moved out to Vancouver in late 1988.
Mm.
And
let's stay on Personality Crisis.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because there's a lot of American audiences who may not be familiar with that band. I mean, obviously, Personality Crisis had a great impact in Canada. I mean, I know there was even a book written about you guys
Right.
a few years back, and the Creatures for a While album has been reissued in recent years. So that band really had an impact. And I was listening to the album recently, knowing that we were going to connect for this. And as I've said to you before, for me, first of all, Personality Crisis was a fantastic band. I just love that record. And one of the things that really stood out for me is Mitch Funk's voice, which was so unique. The only person I can kind of compare it to would be maybe Ian Curtis from Joy Division, possibly, So, musically it was kind of cool because for me to my ears, it was a little bit like slightly sped up New York Dolls sprinkled with hardcore. And then he had this like deep crooning singer on top of the mix. So I could imagine in 83, 84, to some people's ears, you guys probably sounded like you had arrived from Mars, because it was such a different kind of sound. What was the reaction like, especially to that voice fronting that band?
Well, very astute about the Ian Curtis thing, because Mitch was a huge Joy Division fan. I mean, we all were, but he was. We would do acid, me and him, and hang out in his apartment and listen to, Joy Division and whatever other stuff. But Well, in the early days of Personality Crisis, we did She's Lost Control.
Mm.
So there you, and the early stuff, which none of it made it to the album, the early stuff was a lot moodier and not as punk rock. Because we, in 1980 or 81, whenever, probably 80 when we started, we were all big fans of like guitar rock, like this late 60s to mid 70s hard rock, and which was one for me anyway. It was always kind of what I loved, was that guitar stuff. And I always figured we were just a really fast rock and roll band, with this. One of the first guy who managed us had this idea for us that we would all, the rest of the band except for Mitch, would wear like jailhouse, striped jail suits or whatever, the old school ones. And Mitch would be like this escaped convict. And we just looked at him and we're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. But yeah, it was, people either loved Mitch or they hated him, because it wasn't, we weren't like, our roots were further than like the Circle Jerks or, who I love, but it wasn't what I wanted to play. But yeah, I mean, when people loved us, they loved us, like, and they still do. It's interesting, having done the spaghetti incident thing in 92 or 3, whatever it was, and moving to LA 17 years ago and going, to the musicians meetings, AA meetings and stuff at the Musicians Institute. You end up talking with all these people. Do you know who Casey Chaos is?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So I have a personality crisis tattoo here, and the people even in clubs and stuff where I met were way more like, it's not like I go out and tell people, hey, I used to be in, Duff McKagan's band, or I used to play in Personality. I never, ever, I still don't do it. That's just not who I am. But I guess I just said that, so I guess I am, right? People were always way more impressed, if that's the right word, that I was in Personality Crisis versus, and I was like, it's so weird, was it 83? So I guess the record's been out 40 years, something like that. And when you're in the middle of the insanity, you have no or at least I didn't have any concept of, we did okay. We survived barely,
Mm-hmm.
When we lived in San Francisco in the summer of 83, we were the warm-up band for every bigger band that came through San Francisco and played the on Broadway. We opened up for everybody: Bad Brains, Gun Club, Circle Jerks, like whoever. And Dirk or Paul Ratt would give us $100, $100 and a 6-pack of Bud. So when decades on, you hear how it affected people and stuff, and my first thought is, we ate shit in California but nobody cares how you get there.
Right.
It's it's like you read an interview and it's like, this record was so hard to make. There was so much it's like, nobody gives a shit. Is it good? That's all that people care about. So
it's a funny thing. I mean, I was chatting with Handsome Dick last night from the Dictators, and he was talking about, Go Girl Crazy didn't sell shit when it came out. But
Right.
now, it's like this revered album that finally is getting respect, but sometimes it
Like,
takes a decade or three to have
it's like
people catch up.
Raw Power, the MC5, all that stuff, the Dolls. So it's like it's so far ahead of its time that, I always said, somebody asked me once what my legacy or something would be. And I said, I'd like to think that I was one of the people who paved the road so that others later could drive in on.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, that's what's important, you know, whatever happens after that stuff, it's pretty much out of my control. But, and the personality crisis, I just talked to Mitch yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Cool.
Yeah, he's doing okay. He had some issues with some health issues and stuff, but he's actually doing quite well now, and making a plan to go up there and play a show, hopefully in the new year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on. You mean going up there to play with Mitch?
Yeah, I don't. We did the reunion about 6 years ago,
Hmm.
7, whatever it is, and that was it. He just has no desire to do it anymore. He just, he misses me and I miss him. And I said, "You've been going out?" He goes, "Nah, but I will if you come to town." So, you know, I mean, maybe I can get him up on stage for a song or something, maybe, but we'll see.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know when Personality Crisis was active, you guys made it down to Seattle. I
Mhm.
guess it would have been 83.
Yeah.
And when you were playing Seattle, that's when you first meet Duff McKagan,
Yeah.
who at that time I think was still playing drums in the Fastbacks, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that might have been 84 when I met him.
Mm,
But we had played with the Fastbacks in Vancouver in the summer of 83.
okay.
So I'm guessing that it would have been 84 that I met Duff, but he wasn't. I think he might have been was he in 10-minute warning?
He was, yeah.
So maybe yeah, he was playing with Eddie and Paul Soldier, maybe.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, so yeah, I guess it was, and probably Kim Warnick said, "Oh, you got to meet this friend of mine. You guys will get along great." I was like, "Hell yeah!" And I was like, really quite fucked up at that point, and we were playing a house party in Olympia, maybe. And we got down there, and Duff came down. I think the Fastbacks were playing too, or we're gonna play. So we get down there, and the house got raided or something. So me and Duff, we just left everybody. We went to a bar around the corner and drank 7 and 7s all night and just shot the shit. And then we had to drive back to Seattle, and then we hung out every day until we left, which probably would have been about 4 or 5 days. And we just really got on great. It was like I had at that time, somehow I had gotten the Gang War demos, uh, Thunders and Kramer,
right, right.
and I had it on cassette, and it's like I was listening to it because we were all huge Thunders fans, and I was just such a mutual, I don't know, just one of those people I met that you knew instantly you'd be friends for life, which doesn't happen nearly often enough, but
Right.
the fact that it happens is pretty great. And we just kept in contact.
And I know, you were in touch with Duff when the whole Guns N' Roses thing exploded, in '87 with Appetite. And, they were, the biggest band in the world for a minute there, in that era. Um, Having met Duff in the kind of the punk rock scene, what do you recall about, his experience kind of going from being, kind of a street guy to suddenly playing, the biggest arenas in the world? I mean, did he share with you some of that potential mind fuck that was going on with him?
Oh, well, yeah, me and my first wife moved down. We came down to visit Duff and Mandy before they were married, and Duff, Mandy, and Del James,
Hmm.
and his girlfriend or wife, Debbie, I believe. They were living in a small 2-bedroom apartment on Hollywood Boulevard, up by Fairfax, I think.
Hmm.
So, and they weren't anything yet. The record had come out because it didn't really break till till '88
Right.
when Sweet Child came out. So we we hung, and I got really drunk and tried to fight him at Harry Houdini's mansion. You know, yeah, I ended up at El Compadre throwing up all over the booths and stuff.
Oh,
So it was, a good Hollywood type story.
right.
Uh, but we kept in touch and we talked off, and then by nine, excuse me, by '90 we had moved to Vancouver, and I'd started a new band, TT Racer,
Hmm.
and Duff funded the second demo that we did. Oh no, we did a demo. He funded an LA showcase tour sort of thing where we did 4 or 5 shows in '90, I guess it was. And I'm still extremely grateful that he loved the band. He thought we were great. Apparently nobody in the record business did, but who cares? Um, and then through that, we moved down to LA, and we would house sit for him when he was going out when he'd either go to Hawaii to his cabin or something, or go out on tour and shit because it was when we got there in '91, they started touring, but the Illusion records weren't out yet. So they did like 2 or 3 nights at the Forum, and then they would go out and do other shows. And so we were staying at his house, looking after his dogs and shit like that. Yeah, I mean, we did talk about stuff, but what I also saw a lot of stuff.
Right.
Uh, growing up reading Circus and Cream and Hit Parade or whatever the hell, you'd see, Zeppelin, The Who, The Stones, whoever, like the biggest bands in the world. And you just, the dreamer in me, would be like, fuck, that would be amazing. But then to see a friend's band accomplish that, and, biggest band in the world for 3 or 4 years, whatever it was. And it was kind of like the Twilight Zone, a lot of it. I mean, there was the obvious drink and drugs and stuff like that, which probably didn't help the surrealness of it all. But, nobody, at least in my opinion, nobody is prepared for that kind of leap into the stratosphere or whatever, however you term it, like one minute you're playing Raji's or the Coconut Teaser, and then the next minute you're playing the War Memorial LA, whatever, with opening up for the Stones in front of 80,000 people or whatever, and then they were drawing 80,000 people on their own. And it's like pretty tough to keep, I've been asked many times, like, did it change him? And it's like, it has to change you. He was always super cool, and he didn't ever lose that part where he was friendly and great cat. But it fucks with your head, and things would happen, where, and from my point of view anyway, where obviously people were taking advantage of him, and that goes with the territory, there's just no way around that. But it also made not just him, but some of the other guys in the band very wary of people.
Right.
And you add too much of this and too much of that, and the things get it magnified, and I have experiences with it, but I'll leave that for another day.
Well, you end up playing with Duff around 92, 93, because he puts out a soul record called Believe in Me. And he put together a band to promote that record. You were drafted in. And I know there was some stuff that went on with his solo thing. You guys did a show on Headbangers Ball around that time, right?
Yeah, we did that. We did 2 songs, I think. It's still on YouTube somewhere, I think. It's pretty hilarious, I gotta say.
What makes it hilarious for you?
Oh, just how not great I thought we were. And everybody's a good player and everything, but it just seemed a little stiff to me. But probably most of us hadn't ever been on a TV, that kind of a thing before. And you're playing in the studio, and there's no ambience, there's no people, so it's for me anyway, I just felt like it was just weird.
Who else was playing in that band? Because I know it wasn't with Des Cadena when you were with him, right?
No, that was later Loaded or something. Duff's later thing, a bunch of years later. Teddy Andreatis, who has played with like Carole King, Alice Cooper, an incredible, versatile musician, and my roommate for a good part of our tour. And Joey Mastrokoulos, who was in Verbal Abuse way back in the day in San Francisco. That's where I first met him. And Aaron Brooks on drums. Well, Joey, Aaron, and I were in a LA band at least I was for a minute, Circle of Soul.
Mm-hmm.
That was on Hollywood Records. And we, me and Joey for sure, we knew Duff from the punk rock days. Whereas Aaron, I think he came from San Francisco, I think. And Teddy, of course, was fresh off the Illusion tours with Duff and Guns. So it was, I remember we opened up for the Scorpions in Europe for like 3 months or something. And I remember going out for dinner with Klaus from Scorpions, singer. And, my pea brain, I'm like, can't believe I'm going out for dinner with, Klaus Meine or Maine, whatever his name is. And he goes, when you guys started this tour, you really weren't very good. And, I attributed it to his Germanness, and that's not disrespectful at all. It just they cut right through the bullshit
Oh, I
generally.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, and he goes, but this probably was like halfway through the tour. He goes, you guys are getting really good. So when we started, I think we got like 25 minutes or something. And by the end, we had weaseled it up to 50. We just kind of kept pushing it, and it was great. They one great thing that Klaus told me at dinner, he says, I thanked him for letting us use their whole stage and their lighting, and they gave us everything possible. And I just appreciated it, and I thanked him. And he goes, we made a pact as a band in the early 70s when we were touring with Ted Nugent. And Ted's crew, I would assume, treated them like shit. They didn't give them any stage, they didn't give them any lights. And he said, we made a pact after that every band that we get to play with, we will give them everything. And it's pretty damn cool. They certainly didn't have to do that at that point. But yeah, we got to be really good, and there, trials and tribulations of being on tour. I mean, we stayed in 5-star hotels pretty much every night. We had a big double-decker tour bus, and it wasn't like a starting out band kind of thing where you're all in a van and you're all crashing on floors. I mean, it was pretty luxurious tour, and imagine getting paid $500 a week for doing that. I was like, damn, sign me up.
Right on. It was around this time, and here it comes. You knew this conversation was going to take this turn. It was around that time you end up playing on a Guns N' Roses record, the Spaghetti Incident. Although, from what you told me in the past, it wasn't really meant to be that way. It kind of happened by accident. So maybe you can kind of be through what took place there.
Right. I was sitting at home, and I get a phone call, and it's Duff. He's down at some studio down on Melrose towards the freeway. And he goes, hey, do you know you can't put your arms on a memory? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, come on down. It was for a solo record originally. So I went down there and, got it done, and didn't really think much of it after, and then the solo record came out, and I was like, what happened to the song? Is it going to be a B-side or whatever? Just, and no, actually, Axl heard it and demanded that it went on the Spaghetti Incident, which was, interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, people, are always impressed with that stuff. And, I can honestly say I've had that for 30 years, the platinum record, and I have not once ever put it up. But my first wife put it up, and Paula, my wife, now she put it up. So it's like I just, it makes me kind of feel weird. I don't know. If it had been a song I wrote or co-wrote, it'd be different, And it's not an ego thing. It's just, it's just a fucking Johnny Thunder song. I mean, it's a brilliant song. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love it. Did I, Slash, when we were in New York, he came out to New York when Duff's band played at Webster Hall, I think it was. He goes, oh man, I love your playing on the Thunder song. And I kind of looked at him, and I was like, you fucking with me? I was like, I have my insecurities, and but he was serious, and I was like, oh, thanks, man. It's cool. I'm proud that it, it is what it is, of course, but I don't know. I never wanted to live in the past, or,
Right.
what's most important is what I'm doing today. Um, I've actually come to try, like, bios and stuff, I would never put that I played on that record, and not because I'm embarrassed about it, because I'm not. It's just I don't know, it's just weird.
I
But
mean,
I've come, go ahead.
yeah, I mean that's one of the things I actually really respect about you is the fact that there would be plenty of people in the music industry who, if they had that little golden nugget, would push it to the nth degree. And it would be every flyer, Richard Duguay played on Guns N' Roses Spaghetti Incident. But you've always treated it like one song from 30 years ago. And, I remember, and you may remember this too, a few years back, we went to dinner out in
Yes.
LA with my buddy Roger from
Yep.
Pigface. And we're having a great conversation. And me, of course, at one point, you may remember this. I
Dude.
whipped out my Spaghetti Incident cassette cover, and I can see your face just went, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" And as I pulled it out, I'm thinking, "Oh no." I totally just deflated our entire dinner, and you signed it, but you were like, "Fuck."
Well, it just makes me feel weird, like signing stuff. It's like, one of my greatest neuroses, probably, if that would be the right word, is that one day people are going to figure out that I'm a phony and a fake. It's this weird thing. And, I've done some good shit, I've done some shitty shit, whatever. Um, but it's this, hopefully irrational fear that, and I just find, like, signing stuff, it's like, I don't know. And I'm much better with it now than I used to be. Um, I guess my signing, when we were doing the Duff tour, we did some in stores at, like, Tower in New York and a bunch of places in Europe, and it just always struck me as bizarre that, I'm not putting anybody down, because really that's not what I'm talking about, but just maybe it's just my fucked up head. Um, People would line up for, hours and buy an album or a post or whatever, and ask you to sign it. And I always did, and I was, happy to do it. But my thing, well, when we were in Milan, we did a record store, an in-store thing, and we pull up, and there's like fucking 2,000 people on the street trying to get into this tiny, not tiny, but this record store. And there's security and all that stuff. And then we get in and go up to the table where we sign shit, and it's fucking packed. And we're doing it, and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, not sure what happened, but the security just seemed to fucking crumble. And all these people were, it was it was kind of like a Hard Day's Night. There was people everywhere. It was terrifying. And Duff's bodyguard truck and Todd Mackler, the tour manager, they were hustling us out through these throngs of people, and everyone's grabbing, your hair, your coat, your shirt, and we get into the limos or whatever, and then we take off. And I said, I'm never doing one of these again. Because I was like, these motherfuckers they don't even know who I am.
Right.
It doesn't, and it wasn't like an ego thing, like, but it's like, I'm not getting killed for Duff. It was like, and of course I was told that I must attend these things, and of course I did. But who am I? I'm just some fucking knucklehead who's played in a few good bands and still doing it in my 60s. And I don't know. I just feel like I just don't deserve it or something. But
Well, I mean, I get it. It's weird because I've had a few occasions like that, especially when I do stuff out in Chicago with
right,
Pigface.
right,
There's always people with stuff and you're signing things. And look, the reality is when you're playing music, especially these days, I'll go out and I'll do a big show like that. I'll sign whatever anybody wants me to sign. I just signed a bunch of shit for a guy in Thailand who paid me to ship it out. Things like
nice,
that happen. But at the end of the day, man, I come home from something like that. I'm still a month behind on my car payment.
right,
Like the electric bill's going up. It's winter in New England soon. I got to worry about where am I going to come up with triple the fucking gas payment. So that shit levels you out.
right.
It's like,
Yep,
yeah, somebody in Thailand thinks I'm cool. I appreciate that.
absolutely.
Better than someone in Thailand thinking I'm a jerk off, right? But at the end of the day, we're all just getting on with it. And it's like, there's no separation, man. We just happen to play music, but we still have all the other shit to deal with. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and it probably sounds like I'm an asshole about it, and I don't really mean to come off like that. I just it's my insecurities. It's like I always sign stuff, and I make a joke about not wanting to do it because deep down I really don't. But it's I get it. We were in McDonald's in Norway on the Duff tour, and it was me, Teddy, probably Aaron or something, and you see these kids like looking at us and turning away, and finally they came up and asked for our autographs. It was like, okay, I don't know if I signed like a McRib package or some fucking thing, but yeah, it's just weird. I don't know. I think I'm more of a fan of music and the people I look up to, you know, and I don't know.
Yeah, I get
Probably go into therapy about this.
it. Well, let's fast forward a little bit because the way you and I got to know each other was through our dearly departed friend Mike Hudson from the Pagans. You know, um, Certainly one of the most colorful and memorable people in my life experience.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh
so
yeah.
how'd you get hooked up with Hudson? Because you guys did a lot of stuff together in a relatively short period of time. How did that go?
Well, he did a book when his book came out. He did like a reading at fuck, I can't remember the record store, but down in East Hollywood, I believe. And I think the Dogs playing. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And so we went, and I bought a book, and I guess maybe Lauren or something had talked because they had done Hollywood High.
Right, right.
So that probably, and I guess maybe Lauren had told Mike about me or something. So I went up and got it signed, and you know, he obviously had looked me up on the internet or something, which I found hilarious. It's like, that's weird that people do that. So we chatted a bit and whatever, the Dogs played or somebody played. And then Lauren, Mike D'Amico, Ben Reagan, and Tony Matucci from the Dogs.
Right.
They were doing a single or one song or something at Pawn Shop Studios in Van Nuys here. So Tony invited me down. So I thought, okay, cool. I go down and hanging out, and Mike comes up and he goes, "You're playing guitar in this session." I was like, "What?" He goes, "You're playing guitar in this session." I'm like, "You already have two guitar players. You got Ben and you got Lauren. Certainly both great players." I'm like, "Nah, I don't need to play guitar on this." He goes, "Okay, you're singing then." And I said, "All right, I'll sing." And Sarah Shelton departed a few years ago. She was there, and that's how I met Sarah. We both ended up in this vocal booth trying to sing harmonies to Mike Hudson. No, no easy task, I'll tell you. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And we kept in touch. And he's such a character. And he's like, he was several different people, let's say.
Yes. Yes.
One of the smartest guys I've ever met, well-read, intelligent. And then there's the other Mike.
Yeah.
There's the next one was Mike as his voice isn't the greatest, but he had great phrasing.
Mm.
And I loved his voice anyway. But if somebody said, he's no Neil Young, but he's closer to Neil Young than he was Steve Perry, let's say.
Right. Right.
So we just decided to do this fuck you fame whore thing. And that, which is, we did the one song, All Shot Down, which still, I wrote that about Dave Gregg from DOA when he passed away. For some reason, anyway. And I thought Mike would own this song. So we went and got it done, and we mixed it, and that was the day that Mike got in a car accident.
Right.
And that, changed everything, really. But Tony Matucci's, we were talking about Mike, and he said, Mike's one of those guys that if you're in a room full of people and Mike's talking to you, he makes you feel like you're the only person there. And I was like, yeah, that's fucking absolutely right. It's just, and we had our issues, but when we did we did Bad Bet,
Right.
which is, I should send you the original. I wouldn't even call it a demo, because him and this woman, drunk out of their minds at Mike's place, recorded this. And from that I kind of just wrote something and whatever. But don't ever throw away those crappy demos, because you never know. And we were supposed to do a record, and he kind of went into that last phase of his life where it was just, like the Mike on Facebook,
Yeah.
Cheetah and James and whoever else kind of got in his path. And I just couldn't abide by that. And it had nothing to do with him being fucked up. It's just, I can't deal with that shit anymore. I'm just, he was older than I am, but I just, I'd message him or call him when these things were going on. I said, Mike, get off the computer, pick up a guitar, write a song, or write a chapter, write a short story, anything but what you're doing. And he would laugh. And he goes, "Man, it's just showbiz." And I went, "Okay, all right." And it just got worse and worse. And then when he wanted me to go to Spain with them when they played with that Benidorm Dracula Festival or something. It's like a yearly thing. And I just said no, because you're going to give up a free trip to Spain and get paid and everything. And I'm like, I've already played an arena in Spain, several, not to make it about that, but it's like, I'm not going to go halfway around the world to babysit a 60-year-old man who chooses to do his thing. And that's cool. Do whatever you got to do. But, and that, it still weighs on me, because I know we could have written a killer record. But, there's some documentation of what we did, I'd forgotten that we had recorded Runaway,
Right.
and when he passed, I wanted to do some kind of sort of a memorial for him or something, or for what we had. Maybe, I don't know what my motivation was, but I just wanted to do it. And I remembered somehow that we had done Runaway, so I went back into this other studio and finished it up. And it turned out pretty. I mean, he sings it great, totally great. But yeah, I guess it was just the anniversary of his passing the other day. I think about him a lot. We had a lot of great times and ridiculous times for sure.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I mean, I never met him in person, which I regret. I was gonna see him, the weekend that we got together,
Right,
but
right,
the fucker goes and dies like a month before. But I had hooked up with him through Warren
right,
initially,
right.
and I interviewed him. I did a feature on the Pagans, which he was very kind and said, "This is the best thing anyone's ever written on the Pagans." It's like, I'm sure he was just being nice. But he and I kept in touch quite a bit after that, and we'd have these really cool philosophical conversations about being a writer. And Mike was everything you'd want from a writer. He was intuitive, he was insightful, he saw things, was not a dummy by any means. He
Uh,
was sharp as a tack. But Mike, like you said, I mean, just when things were going well for him, he'd fuck it up. He'd alienate somebody who was helping him, or he'd crash into a wall, and it was always like that. It was like that, when he was this close, pow.
well,
But
there was a great quote in Cream magazine in '74 maybe, or something, about the Stooges uh, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory or something like that.
yeah,
And that was him for sure. What you were saying, that just so reminded me of, yeah, he just self-sabotaging like nobody's business. But he always saw himself as this, primarily, I think, a writer.
right.
Um, but he had this, unhealthy fixation on Hunter S. Thompson, Ernest Hemingway, and you can't really, with him, you couldn't really separate that, you know, when he was all fucked up after his injury or his car accident. Um, he would tell me he had like a 44 Magnum or some bloody thing in his house, and he was going to blow his head off, you know. And I went, well, I guess that's what you got to do. I mean, I've had experience with stuff like that before, and it's like, you know, you want to talk about it? And it's like, but when, his fixation on all of that, I mean, no different than people picking up dope because of Johnny Thunders,
Right.
really the same thing. Um, yeah, but yeah, he's one of the most fascinating people I've ever met in my life, and I've met a few. In some ways, he reminds me of James Ellroy,
Mm.
just in the intensity, the intelligence, and Mr. Elroy's well documented propensity for all things illegal, at least that older part of his life. But I think they really struck me as very similar in a lot of ways. And yeah, I miss Mike. You know, there's some days where I just wish I could pick up the phone and just, you know, hear that laugh, you know. And you have uh, posted on Facebook many times. Uh, I guess it was during one of you and Mike's conversations. Mike said, "Writers write,"
Yeah.
and you know, I have maybe co-opted that somewhat in my own world, where you know, it's like that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that I wanted to mention that because it every time I read it or it comes up or whatever, it just you know, it's a great Mikeism for sure. And yeah, it's a good reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad to have had my time with him, you know.
Oh,
Just an interesting guy all around. And you know, what's really cool is, you know, you did put out music with Mike that's still available. I love that version of Runaway. That vocal is just so undeniably him. It's
fuck
perfect.
it. Yeah, I know. It's like when I remembered it, I listened to it, I'm like, fuck yeah, this is so great.
Yeah.
We had started God, what song was it? The Poor Side of Town. You know that, remember that song?
Hmm.
Yeah. Gene, is it Gene Pitney? No, God, can't remember who it is. It's escaping me. But I had worked up a version of it, and he was going to sing it because he wanted to do a cover of it, and we never, of course, got around to it, unfortunately. But that would have been a great Mike vocal as well.
Yeah. Very, very much missed for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, man. Um, but I want to also, you know, talk a bit about the music you've done under your own steam, on your own name. I guess it was 2011 when you put out your first solo release.
Yeah, I think 2011. Yeah, it must have been 2011. Yeah, Gloriously Reckless. That one.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of shit or get off the pot time for me. You know, it was like I had been away from music for a bunch of years due to you know, things.
Right.
Um, and I just thought it was. I mean, I won't even go there. But I wanted to work with somebody rather than just do it by myself. So I hired this guy Pete Mills, an old Vancouver guy who lives in LA now, and we did that pretty quickly. Um, I kind of waffle between loving how it sounds and hating how it sounds. Um, it's kind of a slick production, at least you know for what I do and stuff. But that's kind of was why I didn't want to do it myself. Was to get you know to get outside of myself and see how it's perceived. And we had it was a really good experience, and I learned a lot, enough to at least trust myself that I could do it by myself at my studio. Um, yeah, there's still some songs in there that we play when we play out, which is pretty rare. But yeah, Take My Hand, like the ballad type thing that's on there. Um, it was interesting. I wrote that about a friend of mine, Yoda, who has since passed. And, it's about addiction and loss and all that stuff. And I wrote it about my friend Yoda. And it wasn't too many years later that it was completely applicable to my life. So, I mean, I haven't done that song live in forever, but I still really like that particular song. I think Pete did a great job on the production and stuff on that. Yeah, long time ago.
Well, you've certainly done other records since that time, including Bad Juju, which is a masterpiece in my opinion. That was definitely one of my favorite records of 2019, for sure. Love that album. And you have a more current record which came out in the spring, Beautiful Decline. And I love that record a lot as well, especially your cover of one of the greatest songs of all time, "The Faith Healer" by sensational Alex Harvey Band. So I mean,
yeah, that was a fun one. I would, at certain phases of the record, I would kind of look for some outside feedback, because when you would notice when you're in the middle of something, it's really hard to see it from the outside.
right.
You lose perspective on it, I guess. At least I do at certain points where it's like, I don't know if this is the greatest thing I've ever done or the worst thing I've ever done. It's like you really just. So anyway, I sent somebody Faith Healer, and they were like, "This is terrifying. It scared me," and I was like, "What? Really?" And these are people who have seen things, right? It just seemed like such a off the wall enough thing, and I thought I did a pretty decent version of it. Not as quirky as like Alex Harvey Band, of course, but yeah, it just worked, and it worked in with the sort of persona of the last two records. It's that, yeah, it's people are shocked that I actually did that song, which I find quite interesting. But I guess it's so left field. I mean, in Winnipeg, Alex Harvey was a thing, but a lot of places they never, at best minor cult status, I guess, or whatever because they were just way too quirky, like. I mean, listen to Delilah, it's like it just such a weird, which is why I loved them growing up. But yeah, that was a good one, good fun.
Definitely. And your solo work is on Bandcamp.
Yes,
There's also an EP with your stuff with Hudson is
yes,
up there as well. So I would definitely encourage people to check those recordings out. They're all great. And of course, there's one on the way in the not so distant future. So,
yes.
it's nice that you're certainly still putting out great music. And, when we started this conversation, we mentioned that 77 was kind of the starting point for you. It was the year I was born. Um, so I missed the boat entirely. So I really love these conversations.
Not really, not really. I mean, if you think about it a little deeper than that, we were born ground zero.
That's right. So I'm the living embodiment of punk then, because I was born in 77, right?
Exactly.
Um, so I mean, we're 46 years into your life as a recording musician, and you've had, some fantastic experiences, and you're active now. What keeps you in the game? What does this life provide you that you wouldn't have found anywhere else, but with
Oh,
great music?
I mean, it's an oft used and cliche, but people talk about how punk rock changed their life. I mean, who knows what would have happened had you taken the other fork in the road or the other path, whatever. You know, I try not to, dwell in the past, though I do occasionally, but not for long. Like, it's pretty crazy, being this kid who grew up just fucking loving music and had that, that dream and desire that so many kids have of playing in a band and blah, blah, blah. But see, you actually, in my grade 12 yearbook, it was just, they do those captions, and like, his dream was to play Carnegie Hall. Fate was to play in a basement. And, I didn't get to Carnegie Hall yet, but I've played a lot of other places, and seen the world and met. I mean, it's it's not all champagne and cocaine, let's say, but to still be doing it at hopefully a decent level in my 60s, like I'm not a whole person unless I'm playing music. It's like that's when the trouble starts for me. That's where the darkness starts, and that never ends well, of course, for me anyway. But just the gratitude, I've worked hard, but if you love, what is that cliche? If you love what you do, it's not work.
Right.
Something, and it's like, it took me 3 years with my writing partner, Mark Floyd, to do Bad Juju. I mean, that was a big thing in my life that changed everything for the better musically, was to kind of get out of the shackles of, I know we're going along. I'll try to be as quick as possible.
No, please, please, please.
Where I didn't feel the need to be constrained with classic song arrangement, for lack of a better term, where, you can do a verse and a chorus, and then you can go off in a different path or a different tempo, and it was a lot of work to do those records, the last 2 records, but wow, like the journey, and people as yourself who, I believe, when you wrote a piece for me for Juju, it's not many, I'll paraphrase it, but there's not many people who can claim that their best record comes out 40 years after they've been doing it.
Right.
I mean, thank you. I mean, God, that means everything. And Jeff Dahl had it as his favorite record of 2019, and some other people, and it's like, wow, it matters. And I guess I'm not on the wrong track or whatever. But yeah, that changed my life, where I can have a very low level of focus sometimes. But doing those last 2 records, like I would be in my studio for 10 hours a day, which is attached to our house, and just doing these crazy things that made sense to me anyway. And and the new record is going to be completely not like that. It's going to be like 5 pretty much straight up rock and roll songs with a bit of weirdness, but not Juju-esque, let's say. And because I want to keep the machinery. There is no machinery, trust me, but just keep the momentum going, I guess, is from Juju, and then of course COVID hit, so
Right.
it was like the lost years. Although I did write with Mark Floyd, a lot of beautiful decline during that period. So, I mean, it wasn't a waste of time, believe me. But, you know, touring is way too expensive at this point. I mean, I just don't see how it's possible, not without somebody fronting you the money that you'll never pay back, because
Right.
how can you make money making, 5 guys or 4 people in a van? And, I'm not sleeping in bathtubs anymore, but, just, getting to be a musician and having some respect here and there, and just, but mostly I do it because it's what I do. Writers write.
Right.
I, what else am I gonna do? Am I gonna go work at Amazon? No, I don't think they'd have me, for one. But and I do mixing for people, and I master, and I do whatever, and God, it's great to be me sometimes. But yeah, hopefully I'll get out of town and do some more shows in LA as well this year. We did a show in August that was the first show I'd done here in 3.5 years or something.
Wow.
Yeah. LA, there's not a ton of, I mean, at our level, there's not a ton of places to play anymore. So, but might be playing with Pat Todd in January, possibly.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, was down at the Redwood last night. Pat was playing, and the Street Walking Cheetahs, and it was great. It was, and it's weird, after being here 17, 18 years, whatever it is, it seems like we finally found our niche in the LA music scene, for lack of a better, which is interesting, having always, been a big, as big a part as possible in Vancouver or Winnipeg or wherever, where it finally feels like home,
Yeah.
which is great. It's fucking awesome. When are you coming out here again?
Oh man, I don't know. I'd love to come back out next year, even if it's just for like a week or two.
Yeah,
I changed careers,
right.
a year and a half ago. And I've, changed it kind of since too. I took a big leap, and I've taken some other ones since. So, that's still kind of evolving. But with a bit of luck, certainly by the summer,
Cool.
especially since I've been doing these video interviews, my first sort of goal was to reconnect with some of the LA people, because I'm kind of homesick for LA now and then, especially in New Hampshire right now in bloody November, So I just ran into Alex Kane last night from, Life, Sex, and Death. We did a gig together 17 years ago, my last night living in LA. First time I saw him.
Oh, right. Yeah, I read that today. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'm going to be talking to our good buddy Lauren Molinaire in a bit, for this video thing. So I definitely have a lot of roots in LA still. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed. And the last time I saw you out there, I was only in town for like 3 days. So I'm going to try to like extend the time out there. And I still know, I think my highest concentration of friends is in LA. Sometimes I wonder why I even left, but economically speaking, it probably makes better sense to stay where I am.
Yeah, it's not cheap here no more, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not getting cheap anywhere these days.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
hopefully by the summer, man, and if that happens, we should definitely hook up, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
we'll,
we'll do it. We'll do a song or two or something.
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that.
Yeah.
Definitely, man. We'll keep that
Got
in
a
mind.
drum kit right here. It's an old
Right.
70s Ludwig Vistalite kit for you.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's keep that on the list, man, because that would be awesome.
absolutely. That'd be great.
Cool. In the meantime, I mentioned Bandcamp earlier, where people can hear the soul material. Where's the best place for people to go online to keep up with your news and shows and the other things you got going on?
Facebook is, I'm on Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter. I gotta say, Twitter and Instagram, and I like the conversations on Facebook. Not that there's not on the other platforms, but it's just I've been doing it long enough that I'm super comfortable with it and stuff. So yeah, there's just Richard Duguay on Facebook. I mean, there's a couple separate groups like Richard Duguay Rocks, and then there's Richard Duguay Music that I did for this other thing. But the main one I use, it's kind of my catch-all account, is just the Richard Duguay at Facebook.
Okay. So
Yeah.
your personal account, I can link
Yeah,
that.
I mean, everything goes through there, so that's probably the easiest way to reach out and stuff. Yeah, it's been so fun. Sorry, I tend to blather on and on about certain things, but
That's the whole point of doing these, man. I want to hear
right, yeah,
we're good.
okay, cool,
But yeah, man, it's been great. It's been way too long since we've done, a
absolutely.
conversation like this, man.
Great,
And
great to see you as
yeah,
such as it is.
yeah, great to see you as well. And let's keep next year in mind. We'll do some
Absolutely.
jamming.
I'd love to do that. That'd be great.
Excellent, man. Until then, all the best to you, man.
Thank you, Joel.